The Kings have been involved in like every trade target, it seems like, which is a good thing. We have a lot of needs, and they're pretty much the same needs we had last year. Rim protector, wing defender, and now I guess this year more so than last year, a legitimate starting shooting guard. Now, the trick is, how do you acquire guys who fill those needs without giving up all of your depth or draft picks or Keegan Murray? And that last part is probably the biggest part because every team who's in trade talks with the Kings wants Keegan Murray. But the Kings do not want to trade Keegan Murray. And that's, the smart thing, I think. But the guys who the Kings do want to trade, Harrison Barnes, Kevin Herter, Davion Mitchell, are playing like shit. So the Kings and GM Monte McNair are in a tough spot. Now I want to talk about some of the guys the Kings have been linked to, but before I get into all of that, I want to make something very clear. The Kings do not need to be making win now moves. The Kings do not need to be making panic moves. And this is something I think a lot of Kings fans need to hear. The Kings are not contenders. And that's fine. That is perfectly fine. The Kings are going to be a playoff team in a very tough Western Conference. And while I think they can compete against anybody in a 7-game series, there's a very good chance, maybe not very good, there's a chance, a realistic chance, that this team gets knocked out in the first round again. And while I would obviously be upset, it's not the end of the world. We just got good last year. We're still a relatively young team, and even if we lose in the first round, that doesn't automatically make us a bad team. Going from the worst team in the NBA to the best team in the NBA is a process. And I'm sorry, but it's just not going to happen in 2 years. And by that, I mean like 2 years from us being bad. 2 years ago, we were bad. Now it's been 2 years, and we're good. And I think we need another 2 years to be legitimately great. Because there are some pretty clear and obvious holes in this team, like I mentioned before. And, Kings fans aren't stupid. They're well aware of this team's flaws. Hence why, everyone is begging Monte McNair to make some changes. And it seems like McNair is listening. McNair? I'm going to just call him Monty. I think that's why everybody does call him Monty. McNair just sounds weird coming out of my mouth. Anyway, he's definitely been trying. Or at least, that's what all the reports are saying. Every single dude who is mentioned in trade talks is somehow linked to the Kings. Or at least that's what it feels like. Main guy is obviously Pascal Siakam. Now, there's been some conflicting reports. A few days ago, it seemed like the Kings and Raptors were pretty close to getting something done. Then it was reported that the Raptors backed out. But then, a report came out that report wasn't true. And anyway, I don't know what to believe. But let's just talk about Pascal and how he may or may not fit on this Kings team. I think any other year, in like years past, it would have been easier to acquire Pascal. And I think it would be easier for the Raptors to move him. But it's tough because he's going to be a free agent in the summer. So nobody wants to pay full price. And I know he's, a former All NBA guy. He's a former All Star. He's obviously a great player, and his stats, prove that. But what I think people need to realize, and guys who are in the NBA making these decisions obviously realize this. But I think what fans need to realize, mainly I guess Raptors fans, is that yes, Pascal is an amazing player, but he's a rental. So you're not going to get, a team's best young player in return for Pascal. And in the Kings case, that guy's Keegan Murray, and that's who the Raptors were, at least it was reported that the Raptors really wanted Keegan Murray, which, obviously, but the Kings are not going to trade Keegan Murray for 4 months of Pascal Siakam. That just, doesn't make sense. So, and I keep saying reportedly, but, obviously I don't fucking know this shit. This is what I've been reading, what I've been hearing. Apparently the Kings offered Harrison Barnes, and I'm assuming there had to be other guys. It wasn't just like, oh, here's Harrison Barnes for Pascal. That doesn't make any sense. I'm assuming there's picks or something involved. And obviously that's kind of a low ball, but I would be perfectly fine with trading Harrison Barnes for 4 months of Pascal. Because Harrison Barnes just hasn't really done a whole lot. Love the guy, but he's kind of on his way out, it seems like. Now, as far as the fit goes with Pascal, he would be a great second scorer. He's a solid defender. Kind of fills some of the needs that the Kings have as far as wing defender, another kind of presence down low, and a second option after Fox. And I think it would take some of the pressure off of Keegan Murray But it's not the most seamless fit. I think Sabonis and Siakam might be a little clunky down there. And overall, I just like the biggest point is trading for Pascal doesn't make them a contender. It might get them over the hump of like winning a playoff series or maybe even like two, depending on matchups and stuff. But I don't know. Like I think the biggest thing that's been getting in the way of this trade, aside from only having him for 4 months, is like there's no guarantee that he resigns with whatever team trades for him. And it doesn't sound like Siakam would want to re-sign with the Kings. So like obviously you're not gonna want to give up a lot of stuff, a lot of your assets. But with that said, I think Harrison Barnes for Pascal as a rental is a pretty fair trade. Obviously, I think that favors the Kings a little more. But yeah, it's tough. This is a tough fit because obviously Pascal's a great player. I think he would help the Kings. I just don't think it would get them to be like, as Mike Brown says, a great team. But at the same time, like I don't know if there's anybody on the market besides maybe like Lauri Markkanen who would make them a true contender. And I don't even know if Lauri Markkanen is even available. The Jazz have been playing really well as of late, like 10-4, 10-5, something like that, in their last 15. And I think the price would be way too high anyway. Like I don't think the Kings would be able to offer the Jazz anything that they would want in return for Lauri. So yeah, I think like my dream acquisition for the Kings would be Alex Caruso, but even his price is going to be pretty steep. Obviously, his offensive stats aren't anything to really like get too excited about, but it's his defense that would be a tremendous upgrade for the Kings, who are one lacking defense just all around, and two need like a solidified guy, a consistent guy as their starting shooting guard. So I think he's kind of similar to how OG would have fit on this team. Like you can kind of just plug him in and play him and not really worry about him. He doesn't need the ball in his hands to impact the game. And he's got a year left on his deal after this year. And I think he'd be like an easier guy to re-sign. But even so, like I mean, he's about to be 30. So like even signing Caruso, that doesn't like I feel like it fixes the Kings short-term issues. I don't know if he's like necessarily a long-term fix. Or more so, I guess like a long-term fit, I guess is the better word there. But I don't know. I like Caruso a lot. I think he would help this Kings team a lot. The last guy I'll talk about is Caruso's teammate, Zach LaVine. Seems like the Kings have been attached to him for years now. Um, he's actually grown on me a little bit. At the beginning of the year when the Kings, was kind of floating around that the Kings might want to trade for LaVine, wasn't really about it. I didn't think that the fit was really there, especially at that price. And I think that still is the biggest issue is like if you trade for LaVine, that's kind of your team until, you're off the contract or whatever. It is like 40 to 49 million, I think, every year for the next you got 3 years after this on this contract. That's a lot of money, especially when you're going to want to like extend Keegan, I'm assuming, or even give Malik Monk a contract after this year. Like, I don't know if the Kings can really afford that. I'd have to like look kind of more at their salary cap and all that type of good stuff that I don't really want to look at right now. With all that said, though, he has grown on me because he would solidify the shooting guard position. And he's a bucket getter. He can score, and I think like obviously he'd be a huge upgrade over Herter or Duarte. And that would just shore up, one of the 5 starting spots. But, you trade for him and then you can't really address the other areas of weakness, which are probably bigger areas. I don't know where the Kings would be able to go as far as like those needs are concerned. Is that even a sentence? I don't know. I'm going to keep going though. The Kings starting 5 would be Sabonis, Keegan Murray, Zach LaVine, De'Aaron Fox, and like Trey Lyles. I don't know, man. It obviously depends on what the Kings would have to give up to get LaVine. But like, I guess they're better. Yeah, I think that's better than like, Fox, Duarte, Herter, whoever, Barnes, Keegan, and Sabonis. But I still don't think that like pushes them into the contender conversation. But with that said, like Fox and LaVine would be one of the best offensive, keyword is offensive, 1-2 punches in the league. And by 1-2 punch, I literally mean like 1 and 2, like point guard and shooting guard combo. There's Luka and Kyrie, Book and Beal, and then Fox and LaVine, I think. I don't really care about the East. But the biggest issue with trading for LaVine is his contract, like I said. It's not horrible, especially when you factor in the fact that dudes are going to be getting paid like 75 mil a year in the near future. But if you trade for LaVine, that's your squad for the next few years. And I don't think that's a championship squad. And honestly, that's like my biggest beef with a lot of these acquisitions. Theoretically, we'd be trading away assets, whether it's picks or depth pieces, for guys who I don't think put us over the edge. But I also don't know if there's a guy out there who would put us over the edge at this point in the Kings' development. Now, adding a guy like Caruso or Dorian Finney-Smith or somebody like that makes sense because they would assumably? I'm just saying words that I don't even know are real. But you would think those guys would be cheaper to get and they would help the team a lot right now and would probably push the Kings to the second round. But, if we're talking like long-term goals, which the long-term goal is to obviously win a championship, does it really matter if we made it to the second round as opposed to the first round in year 2? Like, I don't know. Obviously, that would feel great as Kings fans to experience our first playoff series win in like 20 years. I just really, really, really do not want to throw away our future in order to get there. And I also don't think that a free agent would see that we made the second round and say, oh shit, they want a playoff series. Now I want to go to Sacramento. Now Sacramento seems like a cool place to be. I just don't think that's like going to happen. And, I'm sure there's ways to get better now without throwing away our future. And I would assume that's what Monty is looking for right now, are those types of moves. But it's tough because the 3 guys who the Kings have to offer, Barnes, Herter, Davion, are all playing like shit. And we'd be trading these guys at an extremely discounted price, which is just never a smart way to negotiate. It's like the Kings are in a tough spot. And I'm not trying to act like I have all the answers, because if you've listened this long, then you're probably well aware of how little I actually know. But for the first time in a very long time, I trust this front office to make the right moves. So I'm just going to sit back, keep watching my Kings play, and hope for the best. And honestly, that's all any of us can do. I don't know if there's much else to say. I do think the Kings will be active. I just don't know to what extent. And I think the only guys who are safe on the Kings are obviously Fox, Sabonis, Keegan. It doesn't seem like the Kings are wanting to move Malik Monk. I think there's like mutual interest there to extend him, even though that might not happen. I mean, it's most likely not going to happen until the summer. But yeah, I think those are the only guys that like you don't want to trade, because everybody else, aside from like Trey Lyles, has been kind of mediocre. But that's also like other side of that coin is like, yeah, they're mediocre, and that's why you want to trade them. But like, who's going to want to trade for them, But the point I'm trying to make is that if we can get a great player, then great, obviously, But like, we don't need to be mortgaging our future in order to get that. And I don't think the Kings are in a position right now to need to like make win now moves, because like we're really just getting started here, And I know it's exciting because the Kings are like a pretty good team, and we want to see them be like, we want to see them reach their full potential, but that's going to take some time. I mean, just look at the Nuggets. It took them a long time, And same with like the Bucks, the Suns, even like any of those kind of like smaller market teams, took them a while to get going. And obviously, like in the case of the Suns and the Nuggets, it took them getting a guy like Chris Paul or Aaron Gordon to kind of push them over the edge. But I don't think the Kings are at that point to where like one guy is really going to make that big of a difference. So if there's a move out there to be made that makes the Kings better in the short term and the long term, obviously you go out and you make that move. But if there's not, there's no real need to like make a trade just to make a trade, But yeah, like I said, I'm just going to be watching the Kings. Hope you guys are too. Go Kings. Let's light the beam.